I'm going to give you quite a lot of information. As Dinny says, there'll be lots of opportunity to ask questions at the end of it. So feel free to put any questions you've got in the chat. I'm happy to take any questions. I'll always be super honest. So if it's a question that I don't feel qualified to answer, then I will tell you that. I started on the journey of looking at natural health for animals probably about 15 years ago. And I've learned a huge amount in that time. As I started the journey, like a lot of things that we've experienced in the last few years, some of what I heard really challenged my thinking. And I found that quite difficult at the time. So I'm going to say to you that some of what I may say today, if you haven't heard it before, may well challenge your thinking. And I'm not asking you to agree with me on everything that I say. What I would love you to do is just keep a really open mind. So I am going to share my screen with you because I've got some slides that I want to talk through. So bear with me 1 second while I open that. Right. Can everyone see the screen that I have now put up? Yeah, I can see some nods. Thank you. Oh, hang on. Right. So let me just talk through what I was planning to talk through with you this morning. So I'm going to tell you a little bit more about who I am and more importantly about what I do. I'm going to talk to you about how natural remedies work. I'm going to talk to you about one of my favourite topics, and that topic is animal self-selection. Don't worry if that means nothing to you at the moment, because I promise you that at the end of the next hour, you will feel a lot more informed about it. I also wanted to make sure that I gave you some practical tips to take away, because I know when I've listened to presentations, often I've really enjoyed them and found them really interesting, but those that I really love are the ones that I've just got a few things that I've written down that I think I can actually do something with that. So I'm going to give you some practical tips, and those practical tips are going to be around another of my pet subjects. And that's senior animals. So I've got a real soft spot for senior animals. And then, as Dinny said, I'll leave lots of time at the end for you to ask any questions you've got. And hopefully I can answer those questions. I put a little picture up there of a very happy looking fat cat rolling on her back. And that cat is a cat called Cleo, who is very, very close to my heart. So Cleo came into a rescue centre that I used to volunteer at. And Cleo had been rehomed a number of times because she was highly aggressive. And that had resulted in a couple of very serious injuries that had resulted in the people having to get medical attention. So she was kind of on her last chance, if I'm really honest. And she had come into the rescue centre. The people at the rescue centre weren't really sure what to do with her. No one could go anywhere near her. It was really challenging just being able to feed her. And so I volunteered to do some work with her. And I worked with her for about 2 months on a really intensive basis, doing all kinds of things, some of which I can talk through with you today. And after a couple of months, you can see the cat in that picture. So that isn't a highly aggressive, terrified cat. That's a normal cat who's loving life, rolling on her back, and I had just groomed her, which is something that no one thought they would ever be able to do. And the best bit of the story is maybe about a month after that photo was taken, she got rehomed. And that was 3 years ago. And there haven't been any incidents since she went into that home, and she is now loving life. So she's a great example of what the right approach can do for an animal that essentially had been written off. So let me tell you a little bit about who I am. As you know, I'm Jane. I've spent my whole life living with animals. So I was surrounded by animals as a child. I've always lived with animals. I've spent many years working with animals. I've spent much of my life volunteering with animals. So I've got loads of just really hands-on practical experience. Alongside of that, I've got lots of professional experience. So I've done a range of different qualifications so that I can offer a whole variety of different techniques and different tools. I kind of consider myself to have this little toolkit that's full of different tools, and depending on what's going on with an animal, that depends what kind of tools that I use. So I'm super curious. I'm always learning. I love reading. I love listening to things. I think when you stop wanting to learn, for me, that's kind of when I know that I've reached the end of this life. So I'm always really interested in learning. And so I've become a qualified behaviouralist. I've become a qualified nutritionist. And I'm also a holistic therapist and a herbalist. So I've got a range of different tools that I use, but I'm really particularly interested in the use of essential oils and herbs and minerals, and allowing animals to tell us what they need in order to become well. So let me tell you a little bit more about what I do. I do have my own business. It's just a little natural animal health business called Pups and Purrs Wellness. And that's really designed to help guardians to get their pets to be really full of radiant wellness. That was what I planned to do when I set the business up. So regardless of what's going on with that animal, regardless of what life stage they're at, regardless of what their background is, I really want to offer something that can help those animals. Now, I should say, and you can tell by the title of my business, my main focus is cats and dogs. And that's what I've really done a deep dive into in terms of my own knowledge. Having said that, I do get involved with all kinds of other animals. So I've done work with rabbits, I've done work with guinea pigs, I've done work with reptiles, I've done work with horses, I've done work with llamas, I've done work with a whole variety of animals, but my specialism is really cats and dogs. And as I said earlier, I'm really passionate about supporting animals that have got behavioural issues, particularly those situations where the animal might have reached the end of the road in terms of support that is available to them. I'm also really passionate about senior pets. And I have a particular interest in end of life, which might sound a bit strange, but I feel really passionate about how animals cross over into the next life. And I'll talk a little bit about that later on. The way that I work is really practical. So I, in the past, have spoken to animal specialists about my own animals before I became trained. And some of them I found I'd probably read a lot of books and probably knew intellectually a lot, but they weren't very practically focused. So my approach is I'm super pragmatic, I'm really practical, and I'm really focused on what can we practically do to help this situation. I'm really focused on being very up to date in terms of my knowledge. So as I said, I'm always reading, I'm always researching, I'm always questioning my own thoughts. And I'm certainly not too old to say, oh, do you know what? I think I got that wrong. There's something new and better that's now been researched, and this would be a better way to do that. My focus is on being really practical. It's being really open-minded. And excuse me, I always want to treat both the animal and the guardian with kindness and empathy. I know more than anyone that when you have an animal who's either not well or is presenting challenging behaviours, it's quite upsetting. And so I always try and remember that. And I always want to make sure that I have that empathy. So the kind of the impetus for me starting this work over a decade ago was who I refer to as my soul cat, which is Trixie. And I adopted Trixie when she was 5 years old. And I adopted her from a rescue centre where she had been for nearly a year because she was deemed to be unhomeable. And the reason for that was twofold. One of the reasons was that she was highly aggressive, and the other reason was that she had some very complex health problems. And as soon as I met her, even though I knew all of these things, I just fell in love. And I had to adopt her. And so having an animal with those kinds of issues meant that I very quickly realised that I needed to educate myself, and I needed to learn as much as I could to help her have the best life. When I adopted her, as I say, she was 5, and I was told that because of her health problems, she probably wouldn't live very long. And she passed away last year at home in my arms, really peacefully, and she was 17. So she is a great testament to what knowledge and care and love can do. So let me tell you a little bit more about my approach. I really fundamentally believe that when you look at any of us, whether it's a person, whether it's an animal, that you need to take a whole body approach. So rather than just looking at what's going on a physical level, I really focus on what's going on at an emotional level, at a mental level, at a spiritual level, and what's going on in the environment of that animal. So one of the things that I used to feel really frustrated about was that much of the traditional approach is focused on suppressing symptoms. So if you go to the vet, you end up in this conversation about symptoms, and with many vets, not all, because there are some amazing vets, but with many vets, you end up with some drugs or some medicine or something that you take away as a result of that consultation, and that those drugs end up suppressing the symptoms, and you think, oh, amazing, my pet's cured. But actually, all we've done is suppress the symptoms, which pharmaceutical drugs are amazing at doing. What I try and do, which clearly takes longer and it's more time consuming, is I try and get to the bottom of what's the root cause of whatever's going on here. And how do we treat that root cause? So rather than just suppressing the symptom, which in the short term makes you feel that everything's got a lot better, what I try and focus on is what's causing these symptoms and what do we need to do in order to remove that root cause. So let me tell you a little bit about how natural remedies work, because this is the thing that I'm very passionate about. So something that I always say to pet guardians is it's really important to remember that in evolutionary terms, our cats and dogs that we live with are really recent descendants of their wild ancestors. And you can see a lot of that in their behaviour. And if you look at wild animals, they know how to use the natural world in order to heal themselves. And so it stands to reason that if we allow them, and if we are aware of subtle signs, that our cats and dogs can use that same sense. And they can use the natural world in order to self-medicate. And those of us that have dogs will be, and probably cats as well, will be no stranger to seeing them eat grass. And that is a self-medication mechanism. So they haven't randomly decided, oh, that grass looks quite nice, I think I'll go and have a little chomp on it. They know that that grass, by eating it, is going to provide a therapeutic effect for them. And depending on the grass, because they are that clever, that therapeutic effect might be that it's providing some much needed fibre that they need. It might be that it's providing some vitamin C that they need. Or it might be that it's helping them to purge something out of their system that they need to get out of their system. So natural remedies tune in to that natural instinct that our animals still have. So the natural remedies work in alignment with our animal bodies in order to treat the root cause of the illness. Something that I always say to pet guardians is natural remedies really require time and patience, and that's something that we are not very used to. So most of us have been heavily programmed to believe that allopathic drugs and medicines are the answers to any illness. And as I said earlier, they work very quickly to suppress symptoms. Natural remedies don't do that. Natural remedies work at treating the root cause of an illness, and as such, they can take quite a lot longer. So I always say to guardians, expect a minimum of 6 weeks before you're going to see any significant change. I also always warn them that in the short term, symptoms might get worse. So natural remedies often create a toxin elimination in the body. And so in the short term, you might see your pet getting a little bit worse, and that's really normal. And that is the natural remedy working and trying to eliminate any toxins from the system. So patience is really critical. The other thing that's really critical with our pets and natural remedies is our belief. So I strongly believe that our animals are highly attuned to our energy. And so if we believe that, oh, well, I'm going to try this, but I don't think it's really going to work, then the chances are it probably won't work. So it's really important, if you're ever going to use natural remedies, to make sure that you've got your mindset right, because your animal is going to pick up on that mindset. And I don't say this from any point of superiority, because I've fallen down this hole before myself with my own animals, particularly when they're really ill and you get to that point of thinking, I've tried everything, nothing's going to work. It's really easy to get in that mindset. So if you're ever going to use natural remedies, the first thing to do is to work on your own mindset. So I said earlier that I'm really passionate about animal self-selection. So let me tell you a little bit more about what I mean by that. I remember reading quite a long time ago about a biologist called Michael Huffman. And Michael Huffman had spent many years living with indigenous tribes in Africa. And he was intrigued as to why they picked certain leaves and plants and herbs in order to heal themselves when they weren't well. And he was really intrigued as to how they'd got that knowledge, because, you know, they weren't sitting there with Google or with a library of textbooks. And so he asked them, you know, where did you learn to do this? And what they told him was fascinating. So their response to that was they had learned which plants to use for which particular illness by watching what the animals did. And they gave an example of some local monkeys. And those monkeys would eat the leaves of a particular bush for 1 month of the year. And that month of the year coincided with when they normally got worms. And this particular bush was anti-parasitic, which is amazing. So how did the monkeys know that? But the even more amazing bit about the story is that for the remaining 11 months of the year, the leaves of this bush were poisonous to the monkeys, and they never touched it. So they had some kind of innate knowledge that you don't touch this bush for 11 months, but for 1 month of the year, and that's the month when we normally get worms, if you eat the leaves of this bush, then it will get rid of your parasites. And I think that's the best example that I can give of what animal self-selection is and how powerful it is. So it's an entirely natural behaviour, using herbs, using minerals, using essential oils. And the thing that I love about it is it's working in total respect with animals. I find it to be a really empowering approach. And all we need to do is just watch for very distinct, subtle signs and signals, be very aware of what's going on and tune in. And I'm going to give you a few hints and tips of things that you could do with your own animals if you wanted to try self-selection. So self-selection, as I said, tunes into animals' very natural instincts, probably our natural instincts if we were able to properly tune into them. So it can take the form of herbs, minerals, but mainly the use of essential oils. So essential oils can be inhaled, they can be ingested, they can be applied topically. Now, all of that comes with a caveat. So essential oils are super powerful, as those of you who use oils will know. So they need to be used with caution and with a great deal of knowledge, and especially with cats. So you'll often read that you shouldn't use essential oils with cats. I disagree with that, but I think you do really need to know what you're doing. Every species is quite different in terms of how they take remedies, and that difference often relates to what they eat in the wild. It's really important to remember that when animals are taking in natural remedies, they're not actually wanting to eat the natural remedy. What they're looking for is the therapeutic constituent of the plant. And I always say to people that this is about self-selection, it's not self-administration. So I always am guided by the animal and what they want. I'd never ever force any natural remedy onto an animal. When the animal is taking in an oil, those molecules are transported into their cells very quickly, within minutes, and that speed depends upon how they've taken it. So the slowest method is inhalation, and the quickest method is topically. Having said that inhalation is the slowest method, it's the method that I normally use most of the time. And the reason for that is most of our animals have got a much more efficient olfactory smelling system than we've got. So a really good example is if you look at a long-nosed dog like a a dachshund, for instance, they've got 125 million olfactory smells, so smelling cells, as opposed to the 6 million that we've got. And smell is the only sense that has a direct pathway to the brain. Essential oils can cross the blood-brain barrier, so they can affect the body's system very, very quickly. And they can affect not only physical states, they can also affect emotional states. So you can see that oils are really powerful, which is great in terms of using them to heal animals, but does mean that you need to apply some caution. And you need to know what you're doing. And the safety of an oil depends upon the dosage that you're using, which the animal should determine, and the level of knowledge that you've got. So, if you wanted to try self-selection, here's a few very safe, easy ideas that you could try. So the starting point is I would always use the highest quality organic oils that you can. I really favour finding small producers. If you can, find local producers, and make sure that they're producing in small batches. So if you wanted to try self-selection, I would start by offering the oil to the animal with the lid on at a distance of about 30 centimetres. And as a rule of thumb, the longer the nose of the animal, the further away I would start. And what you're wanting to do is you're looking for signs of interest. And signs of interest might be that they look towards the oil, that they start licking their lips, that they might blink, they might yawn, they might look really intently at the oil. So if you see any of those signs of interest, I would keep the oil at the same distance that you got it, but I would just then remove the lid. Then again, watch for those same signs. If you're still seeing some interest, I would then gradually start to move the oil closer, and always keep the oil under the nostrils so that the smell is going up the nose. If while you're introducing an oil, if an animal lies down, that's a sign that they are loving it, that they're really working with that oil. You may find that they've shown positive signs and then they turn their head away. Don't assume at that point that they've had enough. What animals are great at doing is working out the dose they need. So when they look away, they may well just be metabolizing that oil and working out whether they need any more. So wait for them to come back. If they don't come back within a couple of minutes, then they've done with that oil. Similarly, if they are looking to move away from the oil, as I said earlier, totally respect that. This is about self-selection, not administration. So if they don't want that oil, they are telling you, no, I don't need that oil. I don't need the constituents in that oil. Or I've had the dose I need of that oil, then respect that and move the oil away. If an animal really needs the constituent in an oil, you may find that initially you need to offer that quite frequently. Let me share some self-selection do's and don'ts. So unless you are properly qualified and trained, I would only allow an animal to inhale. I certainly wouldn't let them ingest any oil, and I certainly wouldn't apply it topically. It's really important to remain observant and attentive to the kind of signs that I was just mentioning, because some of those signs might be super subtle. So really important that you're focused and that, as I said earlier, you're in the right mindset. So if you're really busy, you've got lots going on, that's not a time to try self-selection. Try self-selection when you're feeling really calm, when your mind's really clear. I would always offer oils or herbs or minerals on an empty stomach. And I'd always ensure that water's available. You may find that animals get quite thirsty doing this work, and they might want to drink in between trying different oils. As I said earlier, unless you know what you're doing, don't allow the oil to touch the animal. Never force an oil on an animal. And if they want to walk away, let them walk away. Okay, this approach is really about empowering and respecting the animal. So if they walk away, then honour that. If they walk away, they're saying, I don't need this, or I've had enough of this, or I'm not in the mood for this. I'd always give access to fresh air. If the animal is on medication, then I'd wait at least an hour after their medication before trying any self-selection. If I was offering herbs and minerals, then I'd normally put them in a bowl, and I'd offer some dry and a little bit mixed with water, because some animals like to take them dry, some like them a little bit wet, and then they've got a choice. Okay, so let's move on to another one of my favourite topics, and that's senior animals. And I'm always amazed at what human beings consider to be old age in particularly cats and dogs. And I think there's a lot of misconceptions. So I often used to see people come into rescue centres preoccupied by wanting a young animal, and thinking that cats and dogs over the age of 7 are old. And I think some of that probably comes from the sort of the old wives' tale that each year of their life is equivalent to 7 of ours. That isn't the case. So the best way to kind of find a human equivalent, whatever you think the value in that is, to a cat or a dog, is the first 2 years are equivalent to 12 years each. And then the preceding years are equivalent to 4 years each. So if a dog was 5, the first 2 years are 12 years each. So first 2 years is 24. And then the next 3 years are equivalent to 4 years each. So that's 12. So that's 36. So a 5-year-old dog is only 36. I don't know about you, but from where I'm sitting, 36 seems quite young. So it's important, I think, sometimes just to reframe our view of whether our pets are seniors or not. Having said that, like all of us, our animals age. And I think one of the things that goes on for us when our pets age is that it highlights our own views about aging, and it highlights our own views about dying. And so it's really important to keep in mind that aging is a life stage, it's not an illness. So we should never feel sorry for our animals. And I want to give you a really clear example of that. So, as I've said a few times, I have volunteered for many years at rescue centres. And in that time, I have seen quite a lot of situations that are quite heartbreaking. And animals that have come in that are in quite a sorry state because of what's happened to them in their previous life. And I have always been very highly attuned to animals. One of the things that I do is animal communication, which, you know, may or may not resonate with you. But I often hear very, very clear communication from animals. And time again in rescue centre scenarios, I have heard animals clearly telling me, don't feel sorry for me. And I have even heard animals saying to me that they don't want particular people in the rescue centre to come and be with them because those people are bringing an energy of feeling sorry for them and pity and sadness. And that's not what they need. And so I think that's a really useful example when we think about our pets aging. So I strongly believe that they need to be surrounded by an energy of happiness and positivity, and they do not need, no matter what is going on with them, no matter how severe the situation may appear, they do not need us to feel sorry for them. They need our empathy and they need our love and our care, but they do not need us to feel sorry for them. One of the things that's really important, though, as our animals age, is that we keep an eye out for subtle changes. So be really careful of ignoring things and just putting it down to old age. And really keep an eye out for things like senses declining, eyesight, hearing. Keep an eye out for dental health, the state of their coat, stiffness, hairballs if it's a cat, sleep patterns, any behaviour change. So all of those things are important things to note and be aware of, and if possible, to take some action on. So let me talk a little bit more about the kinds of things that you can do to take action. So here's some natural remedies that I think are super important to support seniors, along with a picture of one of my favourite little dogs, Sal. So omega-3 is vital. I think it's vital for all animals personally, but it's especially vital as animals age. It's really helpful for brain function and for inflammation. And most of certainly the commercial pet foods that we're sold is really high in omegas, which can increase inflammation. So it's really important that they have the omegas that reduce inflammation. I think B12 is really important as they age. It really helps with cognitive function. So a really good B12 supplement I would add in. Green lip mussels I would add in for joint support. Making sure your animal gets loads of vitamin C, so really good green veggies. I love bone broth. I think bone broth is really useful for gut health, and I'm a big fan of raw dairy. Again, really good for gut health at all stages, but particularly as animals age. So a few practical tips for you, some adjustments that you can make for your seniors. So often we stop exercising them as much. They still need exercise. We've just got to change the intensity of that. So play is still really vital for seniors, not just to keep them physically alert, but to keep them mentally alert. You may need to consider feeding them smaller and more often as appetites decline. And at this life stage, more than at any other stage, high quality food is really key. And I think we probably all know that. you know, I dread to think the rubbish that I ate in my 20s. And if I ate that now, I know that I'd very quickly not feel well. Important to consider food texture and temperature. So dental health may mean that they need softer food. Decline in the sense of smell may mean that you have to warm food up slightly in order to encourage a greater sense of smell. Probably more comfortable and warm beds as they get older, joints start to hurt, so warm beds are really important. I'd look at the height of food and water bowls, particularly as animals might stiffen up a bit. Hydration's really important, so I'd really consider that. Consider filtered water, fountains. As they get stiffer, they may need help with grooming. They might need claws being clipped. They might not be able to jump onto places that they normally would sit and sleep. So, as I just said, kind of more beds in different places, maybe even heat pads for beds is important to consider. For cats with litter trays, certainly think about how easy or not it is for them to get into litter trays. There's some really great low entry litter trays that are worth looking at for senior cats. And as I said earlier, just be really aware and observant to illness, particularly hidden illness. You know, our animals really good at hiding illness. So it's up to us as guardians to be detectives and to be really observant. Ultimately, at some point, we are all going to leave this physical life, and sadly, as much as we want it to be different, that's no different for our animals. But it's a really good opportunity to consider your own attitude to death and pain. Again, my approach is one of being entirely respectful and being really observant to their wishes. As I said before, although it's really hard because you don't know what's happening, you might be really upset, try and remain in that love energy rather than fear. If the situation is happening at home and the animal is about to pass over at home, I'd try and maintain a really peaceful and calm environment. And again, essential oils can be very powerful. So sandalwood and frankincense in particular are very useful oils to offer at end of life because they can help with the transition into the next life. As I said earlier, went through this with my little soul cat Trixie last year. And I have to say, much as I wish her physical body was still here, her last days were some of the most beautiful I've witnessed in my life, and I wouldn't have missed those for the world. And a lot of that is because I really tried to do the things that I have just mentioned.